Proszę Państwa, teraz czas przedstawić naszego pierwszego gościa, pierwszą ekspertkę. Przechodzę na język angielski. It is my great pleasure to introduce our first guest and keynote speaker, Dr. Anaïs Rességuier. Dr. Rességuier is a philosopher, ethicist, and social scientist. She is senior research analyst at Trilateral Research, where she conducts research on the ethics of new and emerging technologies, especially AI. Dr. Rességuier carries out this research as part of the EU-funded projects such as Tech Ethos and Siena. She is particularly keen to shift the focus of attention in AI ethics away from high-level abstract principles to concrete practices, contexts, and social, political, and environmental materialities. Welcome, Anaïs. It's great to have you with us today. It's a great privilege. Thank you for being with us. Hello, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Maciej. Thank you very much, Sofia. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you for this introduction and for having me today to present on this topic that is very dear to me. And I'm sorry I couldn't understand all that you've said, but yeah, I need to practice my Polish. Yeah, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and to discuss this topic. So my name is Anaïs Rességuier. As Maciej was saying, I work at Trilateral Research, which is a company based in the UK and in Ireland. We work at the interface of technology and social challenges. We both develop and do research on digital technologies, especially artificial intelligence. And today I will be talking about the ethics of artificial intelligence, and the title of my talk is The Teeth of Ethics for Artificial Intelligence. So I need to switch the slides. Here we go. Does that work? No, it doesn't seem to work. Oh, here we go. Yeah, it works. So this research has been carried out as part of two EU-funded research projects that Maciej mentioned. EU-funded research projects on the ethics of new and emerging technologies that are funded under Horizon 2020, the funding program of the European Commission. So these are the Siena project that ended last year in March, and the Tech Ethos project that started last year in January and will go on till the end of 2023. So to some extent, the Tech Ethos project further pursues work carried out in the Siena project. So this is the outline of my presentation today. Firstly, I would like to start by presenting what I recognize as being the dominant approach to the ethics of AI, and some discontent that have been raised towards this approach, some critique that this dominant approach has received. Then I would like to draw a distinction within the field of ethics, because I think it helps clarifying a number of issues that we see today in the field of the ethics of AI. And finally, thirdly, based on this distinction, I would like to draw two sets of recommendations for AI ethics. And eventually, the objective of my presentation today is really to work towards more effective AI ethics, to give AI ethics more teeth. So what is the dominant approach to AI ethics, and what are some discontent that it has brought about? So, as you know, over the last few years, the ethics of AI has generated a lot of interest. And in particular, we have seen the development of numerous ethics guidelines and ethics principles for AI. A number of organizations, industry actors, research organizations have developed sets of guidelines and recommendations. Here I have listed several of them, some particularly noteworthy examples of these documents. You will recognize here the ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI that have been published by the high-level expert group on artificial intelligence that was set up by the Commission, by the European Commission. These guidelines were published in 2019. In 2019, also, we've seen the OECD publishing a recommendation of the Council on Artificial Intelligence that includes a set of principles to govern AI. More recently, in 2021, the UNESCO has published recommendation on the ethics of artificial intelligence that includes a list of values and principles to govern the development and deployment of AI. And also on the industry side, for instance, here with Google AI that has published principles for AI applications. So, as you can see, there has been a lot of interest in developing ethics guidelines for AI. There has been so much interest that a group of researchers have done an analysis of these ethical principles in these AI guidelines that have been published. They have analyzed 84 of these documents. Other organizations have listed 150, even more of these AI ethics guidelines. But these researchers have identified some of the key principles that keep coming back in these AI guidelines. I'm sure you will recognize several of these: transparency, justice and fairness, non-maleficence, responsibility. These are some of the principles that keep coming back in these AI guidelines. So these AI guidelines are an interesting development. They help bring attention to the potential harms of this technology and provide high-level guidance on how to mitigate these, what to pay attention to when developing AI technology and AI systems. However, we also have to recognize that these AI ethics guidelines and these high-level principles for AI have also generated some discontent and actually some pretty radical critique. Here I have listed two sets of this critique. The first one being that this ethical approach to the governance of AI is a form of ethics washing. And indeed, we have seen the industry being particularly interested in an ethical governance of AI to avoid hard rules, hard laws being implemented. So a number of AI governance experts have made this critique that AI ethics guidelines are a form of ethics washing. Another form of critique has consisted in saying that AI ethics actually secure existing power relations that then further benefit those in power at the expense of others, and that they don't really contribute to mitigating harms for the most vulnerable of the population that suffer the most from potential harms of this technology. And that is a critique that has come in particular from experts in the field of data justice, data feminism, such as the researchers listed here, D'Ignacio and Klein, who have published a book on data feminism in 2020. Eventually, the critique that these researchers are formulating to AI ethics is that it lacks teeth, that it's not really effective at governing AI and steering the development in a way that is beneficial and prevents harmful impact. So since this critique have been made, we have to recognize also that other responses to the governance of AI have been formulated. Of course, we have seen hard laws being developed, especially with the proposed AI Act by the European Commission, which is a significant step in the direction of establishing hard laws on AI. There are also policy actions, for instance, those listed in the UNESCO document, and we have seen also developments at national levels. Also, we have seen that increasingly trainings of developers in ethical and social impacts of AI are being conducted. The developers are trained to identify these ethical and social impacts and find ways to prevent the harmful impacts. So this is an interesting development. And also we have seen that there are many attempts toward a more practical and concrete implementation of AI ethics beyond this establishment of high-level abstract rules. And this is more specifically what I would like to discuss here today in my presentation. And to do so, I would like to start by making a clarification within the field of ethics, because I think that a confusion on the understanding of ethics has led to some of the critique that the field has received over the last few years. So I would like to come back to some basics of ethics. What is ethics? So the general question and a general response to this question is that ethics is an inquiry on what we should do and should not do. It includes both a reflection on what we have to do and what we should avoid. And it's also the practice of these norms, the actual behavior that follows from these norms. And I would like to propose this distinction within the field of ethics. Firstly, between the norms, between the norms that dictate what we should do and should not do. And this is ethics more in the form of soft law that works a bit like the law, except that it's a softer version of the law. And for instance, to give an example, we have the norms of politeness that we voluntarily apply as member of a society. And this is how we can understand also these AI ethics principles that I've presented before. So that's the first element within the field of ethics. But there is another one that I think is really important to distinguish and to give attention to. It's an ongoing process of attention and reflection. For instance, applying the norms of politeness requires a constant attention to what is happening around us. It's not something that you just press a button and it happens automatically. It requires a constant attention to what is happening. And also it requires in-depth reflection because things change, things are not as obvious as they are sometimes. And for instance, to give you another example, talking about the norms of gender roles, these norms are not set in stone. They can change, and actually they have changed over the last few decades. And this has happened because of this ongoing process of attention, reflection, critical thinking. So there is this dynamic interplay between these two levels within ethics, the level of the norms and the level of the ongoing process of attention and reflection. The norms shape and structure this ongoing process, and in turn, this ongoing process produces and transforms these norms. So what does that say, what does that tell us about AI ethics, and why is it relevant to our discussion here today? I think it's relevant because I believe that too often in the field of AI ethics recently, these two dimensions have been confused and mixed up. And this is what I try to represent this with this a bit funny drawing here. The norms and this ongoing process have been somehow mixed up and confused. And this eventually has led to a weakening of both of these aspects. On the side of the norms, the norms have seen as open, as therefore easily manipulated, softer, weaker, more fluid, and hence it's easy to override them. And I think that's how we can understand what has been called an ethics washing in the field of AI ethics. Industry actors being very keen to go for an ethical governance of AI because basically ethical norms are fluid, changing, so it doesn't really limit their potential innovation and profit-making business. So a weakening on the side of the norm, but also a weakening on the side of what I call the ongoing process of attention and reflection. Also here, I think we are not sufficiently considering the need for an in-depth, radical, ongoing questioning of and study and exploration of AI and its impact on individual society and the environment. I think we have not sufficiently considered this need, and this has led to not sufficient in-depth reflection and critical attention. And this is how we can understand the critique that I've mentioned before, those that say that ethical AI tend to further existing power structure, basically because there is not this radical questioning, there is an entrenchment of the status quo. So this confusion within ethics in the field of AI ethics, I think is very important to firstly identify it and lift it to eventually reinforce these both dimensions of the norms and the ongoing process. And the idea here is really to give more teeth to AI ethics, to make it more effective. So this is the object of the third section of my presentation. Now that I have identified what I think is the source of confusion in AI ethics that has led to a weakening of the norms and the open process of reflection and attention, I would like to make some recommendations to give more teeth to AI ethics. And I actually have two sets of recommendations, one for each of these two levels, level of the norms and the level of the ongoing process, to reinforce this. At the level of the norms, a very valuable way to strengthen the norms of AI ethics is through research ethics frameworks. I will say a bit more about this. And at the level of the ongoing process of attention and reflection, here as well, we need to reinforce it through an in-depth research and on the impacts of AI. So let me say a bit more about these two recommendations. So to begin with, at the level of the norms, the research ethics frameworks that I advocate to develop further. And by research ethics framework, I mean what we also called, I think mainly in the US, they call that institutional review boards. So these are frameworks to govern the way research is conducted. And this research ethics is particularly well developed in the field of medical research. That's where it was elaborated initially. It was developed following several cases of harms conducted on human participants, in particular the harms done, the horrific experiments in World War II by Nazi researchers. So all this framework, I think, is very useful. It's very useful framework to develop for AI ethics. Although research ethics frameworks take the shape of soft law, that doesn't mean that they don't have mechanism to ensure compliance. On the contrary, they do have mechanism within their institutions. For instance, if a research organization violate research ethics rules, they can be penalized by having research funding withdrawn or by being excluded from the research communities. So there are mechanisms to ensure compliance with the norms of research ethics. And we definitely need more of these frameworks to be developed and established in research organizations, research institutions that develop AI. And actually, over the last few years, we have seen several developments in this area, development that are very much welcome. In particular, we can mention what has been done at the European Commission level. The Commission has established AI ethics requirements for all projects that are funded and that develop AI techniques and systems. So that means that if a project is funded by the European Commission, it has to abide by research ethics rules established by the Commission. And this is a process that we had the chance to contribute to as part of the Siena project. That was a very interesting project. Of course, it's not perfect. We have to see its effectiveness. We have to see how it develops in the future, and definitely assess its effectiveness and eventually enhance it as necessary. Also, I've listed here the need for documentation. This is really important to ensure accountability, transparency of AI systems. It's a key tool within research ethics frameworks. And I've listed some type of documentation that are very useful for AI systems, model cards and data sheets for data sets. These are two types of documentation that have been proposed by two researchers, Gebru and Mitchell in 2019 and 2020. Either two model cards aim to document characteristics of a model used, and data sheets for data sets to document details of a training data set. So this is definitely a field of work that needs to be developed much more. There are already a lot of effort in this area, but we should definitely further pursue this and implement this kind of framework within different institutions, organizations, conferences, and so on. So that's at the first level, the level of the norms. But also work needs to happen at the level of the ongoing process of attention and reflection. And here I would like to raise particular attention to the very important role of social science and humanity research on AI and its impact. We really need this kind of critical, in-depth research on AI, how it's changing the society, how it's affecting different communities, how it's impacting our democracy, and so on and so forth. Here I've listed some elements to pay particular attention to. Also, how AI might be entrenching retrograde worldviews, We also need to look at the impacts on the environment. That is something that is increasingly shown as an important element because training an AI model uses a lot of energy. So that's really important to get a clear view on what are these impacts on the environment. So this in-depth research on the impact of AI is also very important to insist on, to develop more. And I've listed here an example of such type of research, which I think is particularly valuable and noteworthy. It's the work carried out by, I have a picture of her book, but yeah, the work carried out by Kate Crawford, that maybe some of you know. She has published a book last year, Atlas of AI. And I think that's a great example of such type of in-depth research on the impacts of AI. With this book, she moves beyond the dominant view on AI as a supposedly immaterial technology, a technology that would have no impact on the society, on the environment. And quite on the contrary, she shows, and I have a quote from her here that I would like to read to you. She shows that artificial intelligence is both embodied and material, made from natural resources, fuel, human labor, infrastructure, logistics, histories, and classification. So as you see with this book, she really contributes to redefining, to reconceptualizing this technology. She helps to shed light on it. And by doing that, she helps to better understand it and eventually better govern it. And I think this kind of research is very much needed here as well to make AI ethics more effective. So we're getting to the end of my presentation. I have a last slide that presents the key takeaways, and I would like to show it to you. Here we go. Yes, so I have three key takeaways of this presentation. Firstly, I have shown that there are two different aspects within ethics, the level of the norms and the level of the open process of reflection and attention. I have shown that it's very important to distinguish these two elements because the confusion between these two aspects has led in AI ethics to a weakening of both of these aspects, a weakening that has led to a form of ethics squashing on one side and on a weakness of critical perspective on AI ethics on the other side. And to respond to this weakening, I argue that we have to strengthen both dimensions of ethics for AI. We have to strengthen both the level of the norms, and a very valuable way to do that is through research ethics frameworks. And secondly, we have to strengthen the open process of reflection and attention through in-depth critical work on AI and its impact. And that's the end of my presentation. So thank you very much, and I look forward to questions or comments you might have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anaïs. It was a great pleasure to listen to your talk, and it was very insightful and shed lights on different facets of ethics. We don't have too much time, but I would like to ask one question. Okay, do you believe that the results of this ongoing process of attention and reflection upon AI can be effectively transmitted into practice? In other words, are we ready for this sort of work in progress that would periodically change the way we approach AI?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the way to go, actually. I think we do need this in-depth reflection and attention. We need to shed new lights on AI. Like, for instance, I gave this example of the book by Kate Crawford that helps to take into account many aspects that tend to be invisibilized and hidden. Of the impact of AI, for instance, environmental impact. We tend to think that AI does not have environmental impact because it would be a sort of intangible technology, but this is far from the truth. She shows the different environmental impact that AI has, such as with the use of energy consumption in AI model training, or the rare earth that are needed to produce the infrastructure of and the tools of AI. And this eventually shows that we need to account for this environmental impact for the governance of AI. And if we have to make a cost-benefit analysis of an AI system, we have to account for this environmental impact. So I think that's a very helpful way that critical thinking, critical reflection brings to concrete, constructive governance of the technology.
Great. Once again, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we don't have much time for another question, but I do believe that we'll meet soon and we'll have a chance to discuss it further on. Everybody is very much encouraged to read our interview on the Ethics Tech EU website, CET website. There are some of the questions discussed today also discussed. So thank you once again, Anaïs. See you soon. All the best to you.